Hello, I'm Michael Boland, the Total Wellness Counselor, and I've decided to make a video for you today that's essentially a mindfulness video. It could also be considered in the realm of meditation, but really it's more than that. Uh, it's a strategy that I've learned mostly from Eckhart Tolle. I believe I'm pronouncing his last name right. I think I've heard some people say Tolle, but Tolle. And he's a master of presence. Presence being that place of stillness, that place of peace that eludes most of us. And me being a person who has sought after every single tool available in existence that I've known of, that I've heard of, to find peace. It wasn't until I understood Eckhart's teachings and applied some other principles that I've learned along the way that didn't quite get a breakthrough for me. But that combined with what Eckhart taught changed the game for me. I'm in charge of my mind now. I'm in charge of my emotions. That doesn't mean I don't have a reactive moment, but that when I do, I become aware of it and can disengage it and be empowered to not be manipulated by the emotions and thoughts that I may feel or hear from time to time. So I'm going to make this video as a way to introduce to you the principles of learning to be in stillness, which is a huge thing that God talks about in the Bible that eludes so many Christians and eludes people of all walks of life, because most of us, let's face it, we are the servants of the mind and the emotional states we feel. Whatever the mind says, we generally go, well, that's a problem if your mind is producing lots of anxiety for you, analytical thinking, future worry, past regret, which it is for everybody. And before I do this, I'm going to lay out a couple principles on the board behind me for you. And in future videos, I'll explain it more, but I just want to give you a little taste of understanding presence, stillness, that is able to bring you into a place of peace so that you can be free of the mind and emotions. They're tools. The mind and emotions are tools we have. They're not our identity. I'm Michael, the spirit living in this body, and I have a mind and emotions. What I also have is an ego, and you can call it whatever you want. In the Bible, it's called the old man. But really, the ego is the insecure, false self that forms as a maladaptation of all our past traumatic experiences, the culture we grew up in, the perceptions, your sense of self that is insecure. You know you're insecure when you can be threatened, because nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Thus, when you're living by the ego, you have to protect it because it's insecure, because it doesn't feel it is enough to just be. So we get defensive, we attack others, we go after destroying other worldviews, we judge others, we harbor resentment, bitterness, anxiety, all these things because we're insecure, because we're needing to make ourselves feel better through stroking our insecurities, temporarily filling that hole with, yeah, I told them off. How's that working for you? So I'm just going to lay this out quickly for you, and then we'll do the exercise. You are a being. God made you enough already. He's impressed with you. He loves you. This being, you have tools He's given you. we'll say the mind, the emotions. As you can see, you are not your mind or your emotions, you have them. That will change your life alone right there, understanding that, as it did mine. But the other thing I like to add to this is that due to your past experience while you were a child, unless you were amongst the rarest people that had parents that understood some of these things and helped you to build a secure identity, you struggle with an ego, which we'll say is a false self with holes in it that need to be filled. We'll say this hole is not good enough, which that really encompasses about all of them, but just for the purpose of this exercise, we'll say in this one is I'm a failure, right? And this is why people then work 70 hours a day to try to ease the pain of that. But just as a pharmaceutical pill does, it doesn't actually solve it. It just kind of duct tapes over it for a while, but it's still there and gets worse if not dealt with, widens even more. And what the ego does, once we identify with it, because all of us were identifying with one thing, you're either identifying with truth or you're identifying with the lie. You'll know you're identifying with the lie if you feel tons of anxiety, you feel insecure, you avoid emotions, you feel like you don't want to do any of this, you're living in the ego. Because if you were living in your true self, you wouldn't mind looking at your mind, emotions, or ego, because you'd know that they're all a narrative anyway. They can all be taken charge of by the real you, so thus you're not really under threat going into things of the ego, of the mind, of the emotions, because you know the real you is not them. You just have them. So a little bit more, then we'll start. As we're doing this exercise, I'm going to be asking you to become aware of the mind within you by essentially observing the thoughts, becoming aware of the emotions going on within you by feeling them, observing them, allowing them to be there, and becoming aware of the ego within you. That voice, those feelings, that feeling of lack, of needing to prove yourself, of feeling like I need to defend myself, of feeling reactive, like I can't allow that, right? The ego is permanently insecure. If you're identified with the ego, you can never actually be secure because this is false. It's not real. But it developed from, say, for instance, like a kid who is told on the playground he's a loser, he's stupid, then he comes home, his dad tells him he's stupid too. That kid would naturally develop a mindset of seeing himself as stupid because when he was told those things, he was too young and vulnerable to know the difference. So now science has proven that we can be rewired, right? Brain neurons that fire together, wire together. But renewing the mind is difficult when you try to renew it from the analytical mind, from the ego. And we're just like trapped in here and we wonder, man, no matter how much I try thinking good thoughts, why do I always end up feeling like this? Because you're identified with the ego. And I'm going to teach you how to get free of it so you can observe them all and feel the peace come in, the peace of being. There's no insecurity here. And yeah, we got to get rid of a lot of old mindsets, stuff like God's holding you to a standard that he's not pleased with. Who could ever feel confident and secure in that? That's impossible, right? If you feel like God's disappointed in you today, who could live at peace? So it's understanding how God sees you, that you're at peace with him, that he made you how he wanted you, and thus you can start observing your mind, emotions, and ego. Because it's a real thing. If you're not sure if the ego is real, watch the next time that somebody calls you out on something, or somebody does something that doesn't fit your worldview. Watch how you react. Watch if it's out of insecurity, which will often justify, say, well, I have to do that. No, because nothing real can be threatened. What's real is real. That tree outside is real. The sun shining is real. Certain foods are real. Peace is real. True identity is secure. So let's do the exercise, and I hope even if you just get a 1% feeling of that stillness, we're on the road, because this has worked for me and millions of others. And taking charge over the mind, the emotions, and the ego will free you from the prison cell that you've often felt like fear puts you in. So I'm going to do it with you. This is essentially what I do daily, which I don't necessarily need to close my eyes for anymore, although I always think it helps if you can. But sometimes I'm always practicing presence now, even though I'm chilling, walking around the house, cleaning, doing something, talking to people, driving, that you can be aware of your true self, your spirit, or whether or not you're off in here. And it's better being in the spirit. It's better observing the mind. So let's do it. See if you can get it a little bit. So close your eyes and just become aware of your breathing. I find it helps if we think of our true self, the presence, as being the observer behind everything, your spirit. So it's kind of like, imagine, I don't know, you're standing in a wide open park, and your mind, ego, and emotions are 3 trees in front of you. So we're going to look at the mind first. Look at the mind within you. Whatever it's saying, just view it neutrally, even if it's worrisome thoughts, good thoughts. If you haven't practiced this, they're most likely judgmental, negative thoughts. View them. Allow them to be there. Don't resist them. Listen to it like you would. So like the tree in front of us in the park, just imagine, you know, it has a bunch of like 1,000 birds flying around it, and just watch it. Watch all those thoughts. You're not those thoughts. Thoughts come from many different places. They don't necessarily mean they're true. You could have random thoughts, right? I'm sure you thought things randomly before you're like, whoa, what was that? Not everything you think is a reflection of truth. What's true is to watch those things and discern what is true and what's just mind chatter. So let's just watch the mind together for 30 seconds. Observe it. Okay. If this is your first time doing anything like this, it's probably difficult to not identify with every thought, but you're beginning to taste the first fruits of observing the mind as though it's separate from you, as though it's a tool you have in your tool shed, not your identity. Your identity is the watcher, the knower, the spirit that can view the mind. That's how powerful God made you. You're not defined by the tool within you, because often the tool goes haywire because it can be influenced from a very young age, and you're unaware. And neurons that fire together wire together, and that's why we see people of all walks of life manipulated, brainwashed, in multiple things, because the mind can wrap itself around anything, and thus we need to observe it to discern what's true and what's not. So let's move to the emotional state now. In the same way you're viewing the mind, let's look over at the other tree, the emotional state. Feel it anywhere in your body. Do you feel your emotions in your stomach area, your chest, maybe your head, your neck? I feel a little bit of slight tension right now in my gut region, which is where I generally feel tension if I do. I'm just going to bring my focus there and observe it in the same way like I'm observing, let's just say you're at a car dealership and you're looking at a certain car. It's looking at the emotional state within you. The emotions are not reflective of truth. They're reflective of thought patterns. Just because you feel a certain way doesn't make it true. Your feelings follow whatever you're thinking has habitualized. So thus, if you feel anxiety, it's because you have chronic habitual thoughts that produce that feeling in your body. If all you did was think thankful, positive thoughts, you would not feel very much anxiety at all. So it's not condemnation. It's not to feel bad that you've become a negative thinker. It's okay. We all do. It's just to realize just because you feel something doesn't make it true. Just because you think something doesn't make it true. So we observe it. And I want you to just observe that emotional state. Take your full focus right into it. Allow it to be there as though it's an amusement park ride you're on. I also like to say as though you're sitting on a porch with a tornado coming in and the tornado's coming at you. You can feel the wind, but that doesn't mean you're the tornado. It's the same with the emotional state. So let's observe it, allow it, feel it, knowing it's not the real you. It's the product of past thinking. So let's feel it together. What you'll have happening, like I have happening right now, is you'll have peace come in. Because when you disidentify with the mind and the emotions, not ignore them, not disregard them, disidentify, meaning you acknowledge you have them, but that they're not the real you. They don't define you. They're tools you have. And peace comes in because you realize you can feel something and hear a thought and not have to believe it. You can feel something, hear something, and keep your observing presence of it. And that's what being in the spirit is. Now, rather than the mind and emotions running you, you run them. Now let's look at the ego. You'll know the ego is activated within you, which we're either identifying with the true self or the ego. There's only two options. Call it whatever you want. Call it the old man, the false self. I just call it the ego, but it can really be called anything. You'll know you're identifying with that if you get offended a lot, if you get reactive, if you feel anxious, if you feel really scared. The real you is not scared of anything. The real you is not anxious about anything. You're one with God. Like a tree being scared of something, right? It's like when that peace and stillness comes in, just as Psalm 46:10 talks about, be still and know I'm God. That stillness can only come in when you identify with truth, when you're in the spirit. When you're identified with the false self, no peace can come in because you feel like there's holes in you. This could represent anything. It could represent, oh, what's going on in the world today, any external. Oh, I'm not good enough. Oh, God's disappointed in me. Peace is impossible in this place. As long as you identify with it, you can't have peace. You can maybe have 5 minutes of what feels like peace, but those holes remain, and they can't be duct taped over. This can only be disidentified with. It can't be fixed. You can't fix a false thing. You just disidentify with it. Now, when you do, as you're here, this remains for a while. There's multiple reasons for that that we can get into in the future, but just know you're going to have to observe this thing for a while. You become aware of when you're reactive. You become aware of when you feel wildly insecure, and you can own it allow it, watch it from the real place. So it kind of feels like this. I'm triggered, I'm activated. The ego, because I've identified with it for 20 years, has hijacked my mind and emotion to do its bidding. Thus, I never feel secure and confident, right? A lot of people are in that place. But as you sit here for a little bit and observe this, you're going to feel intense emotion running throughout your body, fear, all these things, but you're going to watch it as though you're on an amusement park ride. And it frees you from it. And you observe the ego rather than you think you're the ego. So this is the ego, and this is my true self, and I still identify with it. I'm like, oh God, I'm just this insecure person. Look at me. This is what presence does. You take the ego, you separate your true self from it, you view it, and you go, oh, it reacts. That false self operates like any microorganism, anything in the world that has a survival mechanism of it likes to follow the path of least resistance and remain alive. So it will stir up things, emotions, and for a while you're just going to be viewing it and viewing the reactivity in yourself while knowing it's the ego, it's the false self that's formed. Then when you start thinking habitual thoughts like, oh God, nobody likes me, what's wrong with me? You go, wait a minute, that's right. All right, let me view that, let me feel that, let me hear those thoughts and watch it like I'm on an amusement park ride. That's not the real me. It's the narrative playing out like an audio tape that I can view. And as you view it, you'll feel this gentle peace come in because you're sitting in this seat. And the more you do that, the more these tools get back into regular place. The more you disidentify with that, pretty soon you're here most of the time. Everything gets back into regular orbit. This shrinks. You recognize when this is trying to hijack a moment, and now you stay here, and now you come into your true self. And I'm going to make other future videos to help. This one was more just to lay out the basic principles. I encourage everybody to read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. Don't let his verbiage or particular worldview turn you off. See if you can find the nuggets of truth in it. Sometimes truth comes in interesting packages, but that the fruit proves the truth. The fruit of peace, the fruit of stillness, joy, presence, security, confidence. So I hope this video helped introduce this to you. Practice seeing if you can observe these things in yourself, feel them, disidentify from this. It's all just a narrative. It's a product of your upbringing. It's a product of the culture you've lived in. And if you're going to get into truth, you've got to recognize that all this is influenceable and thus capable of not telling you the truth. It just gets wired. It doesn't necessarily have to get wired according to truth. It gets wired according to what you focused on. And when you were too young to know the difference, you could focus on anything. And it seems that 99.9% of us have focused on false narratives that bring about this. So I'm on a journey with you of getting free. I'm still learning to stay here all the time myself. And I'm making this channel for nothing more than to give you an opportunity to try something new, an alternative, see if it works for you. See if other things work for you. Go where the most fruit is. So until next time, be blessed, be present, be still, and take care. I'll talk to you again soon.